Hi, I'm Becky Yamble. Welcome to the Marketing Minute. I'm going to be sharing TrendWatch number 8 tonight, and the topic is birth rate. I'm sharing information from one of my favorite sources, the American Demographic Magazine, and this article happened to be called Bye Bye Babies, so I use that up here. And what I'm going to share with you is the fertility rate has dropped to a 30-year low in 2019. That's my first comment up there. And let's take a look at what some of this means. So there was a period right after the baby boom. We called it baby busters, and that was a period from 1965 to 1976 when there was a drop in birth. So we call that the baby busters, which has now been renamed as the Gen X generation, and that lasted for 11 years. Now we've had a 12-year period of declining birth rates. So let's take a closer look at that. What does that really mean? In the year 2019, the latest they have put together some of the statistics, there were about 3.7 million births, and that is interesting because in 2007 we hit an all-time high in the raw number of births. However, we were at a declining rate, and I'll tell you more about that. So we had 4.3 million births in 2007, which was a peak as far as the raw number goes. However, it was a drop to 2019 of about 500,000 births by the time we got to 2019 from that rate. So let's take a look at what the statistics are in a little more detail. Typically, we look at the ages of women's childbearing years from 15 to 44, and let's just take a look again at some of those numbers. So in 2019, the birth rate was 58.2 per thousand. So we usually talk about this in terms of per thousands. And what does that mean exactly? Well, if you typically want to compare some numbers, in 1960, that rate was more than double at 118 per thousand. And then since we're talking about 2007 when there was a peak, we're going to use another comparison. In 2007, when we hit that peak of 4.3 million, the birth rate was 69.5 per thousand. So you can see, if you can see my numbers here, in 1960, 118, 2007, we were 69.5, and now the most recent 2019 was 58.2. So we are continuing to go down. And so what's causing that? Well, people are tending to think now we are on a new trend, and actually a lot of futurists, when I was doing that work, and other futurists, we were talking about this back in the 80s and 90s, and it was already emerging at that point. So these are things that we have known were coming for a while, although not a lot of people pay attention to some of that. I saw this starting when I was doing research back in the late 70s and predicted some of the fallout that we're seeing right now. So a couple things: later marriage, later year or age of having children, more women are attaining higher education levels and higher incomes, so that has changed the whole dynamic here. Another piece of information for you to take a look at, or another statistic, is something called TFR, total fertility rate. And let's take a look and see where the U.S. is. So 1.7 is the total fertility rate of the United States in 2019. And just as a comparison, the replacement value is 2.1. So total fertility rate for replacement would be 2.1. And that takes into account a lot of other things like infant mortality and everything. So it takes 2.1 to replace the population. So this is not only in the United States, and we are actually having higher fertility rates than other countries. In Germany, for example, the fertility rate most recently in 2019 was 1.57. So that is below the U.S. And Japan, you've probably been hearing this for years. If you pay much attention, you've probably been hearing this about the aging population in Japan, and it's certainly creating some issues there. So in 2019, in Japan, the fertility rate is 1.42. So keep this in mind. If there's a way that you can use this information, it might affect the products and services that you are developing, how you might see some changes in the applications. And probably the biggest thing that's going to happen is our labor force. And I'm not sure if I'm going to do a video on that, but it is a huge one, a big implication, because our labor force is shrinking every year, and that can be a challenge. Thanks much.